You are about to watch the smartest person you know make the same mistake for the fourth time, and you will not be able to explain why. Not because the explanation doesn't exist, because the explanation lives somewhere intelligence was never invited into. She graduated top of her class, ran a department by 31, could read a balance sheet the way most people read a stop sign instantly without thinking, the danger obvious before the second glance. And she has now dated the same man 3 times in 3 different bodies, with 3 different names, 3 different jobs, 3 different cities. This isn't a story about bad luck. Bad luck doesn't repeat itself with this kind of precision. Bad luck doesn't wear a pattern like a signature. This is a story about a wiring problem, one that intelligence was never built to fix, because intelligence was never the department in charge of it. Act 1, the pattern nobody names, here's where most explanations for this stop, and it's exactly where the real story begins. Psychologists have a name for what's happening: repetition compulsion. Sigmund Freud noticed it first, over a century ago, watching patients who didn't simply remember painful patterns from childhood. They recreated them in new rooms with new faces as adults who should have known better, not despite their intelligence, often because of it. A smart brain is, at its core, a pattern completion machine. It is extraordinarily good at taking incomplete information and filling in the rest. That's the exact skill that makes someone brilliant at chess, at diagnosis, at strategy. Show that brain half a shape, and it will finish the shape automatically, instantly, without being asked. Even if the shape is a skull, the wrong partner does not feel unfamiliar. That's the trap hiding inside the trap. If the wrong partner felt foreign, alarming, obviously dangerous, no one would need a documentary to explain this. The wrong partner feels like home, and home, for a significant number of people carrying this pattern, was never actually safe. It was simply familiar, and the brain, tragically, was never taught to tell the difference between those 2 words. The analysts call her Mary, senior risk analyst at a firm that pays her specifically to spot danger before anyone else in the room does. Currency exposure, credit defaults, systemic risk 2 moves before it becomes a headline. She is, by every professional measure, one of the best in the country at seeing what's coming. At home, she married a man who disappeared for days without a word. Twice. Her friends asked the obvious question, the one everyone eventually asks in stories like this: how does someone this good at reading risk not see it coming? But here's what makes Maren's story different from the version people usually tell. She did see it coming. She saw it in the first 6 weeks. She told her sister, in a phone call her sister still remembers word for word, something feels off about him. She married him anyway. Because off had a very specific flavor, one her conscious mind couldn't name but her body recognized instantly. It tasted like her father's unpredictability at the dinner table, the same silences, the same sudden absences, the same feeling of never quite knowing which version of him was coming home. And some part of her brain, not the part with the MBA, not the part that built financial models used across 3 continents, had been trained since childhood to read chaos as intimacy. Trained so early and so consistently that by the time Maren was making 6 figures predicting market collapse, she still couldn't predict her own front door. Emotional reset. If you just recognize someone in that story, including yourself, sit with that for a second before we go any further. We're not here to diagnose you. This isn't a documentary interested in labeling anyone broken. We're here to show you the mechanism cleanly, without judgment, the way you'd study the wiring in a house before deciding what to do with it. What you do with it after this is entirely yours. Act 2, the mechanism. Familiarity bias, here's the mechanism, stripped all the way down to its parts. The brain does not search for good partners. This is worth repeating slowly because it contradicts almost everything we're told about attraction. The brain does not search for good partners. It searches for familiar nervous systems. Familiarity gets processed by the same neural reward pathway associated with safety, even when what's familiar is inconsistency, criticism, or emotional unavailability. Psychologists describe this as a collision between 2 well-documented effects: the mere exposure effect, which shows that repeated exposure to something increases our preference for it regardless of its actual quality, and early attachment conditioning, which determines what a nervous system is calibrated to recognize as normal in the first place. What you were exposed to first becomes what your nervous system reads as normal, not what's healthy, not what's good for you, what's known. And here is the part that makes this especially dangerous for intelligent people specifically. Intelligence doesn't override this circuit. It was never built to. Intelligence gets recruited by the circuit instead, pressed into service on the wrong side of the argument. A smart person doesn't typically walk past red flags because they failed to notice them. They walk past red flags because they build the most sophisticated, well-reasoned argument in the room for why this particular red flag is actually fine, actually different, actually not what it looks like. The very intelligence that should protect them becomes the legal defense team for the pattern. The physicists call him David, 42 years old, a physicist trained to notice inconsistency in data down to the 4th decimal place. His first marriage ended after 11 years, his wife's final description of him lodging itself permanently in his memory, present in the room, absent everywhere else. 18 months later, he remarried. A different woman entirely, different background, different temperament, different profession. Same complaint, delivered almost verbatim at month 14. David didn't choose emotional distance because he's incapable of connection. That explanation is too simple, and it lets the real mechanism hide. He chose it because his mother, without meaning to, rewarded his independence in childhood and quietly punished his neediness. A raised eyebrow when he cried, warmth withheld until he stopped asking for things. To David's nervous system, a partner who requires very little from him doesn't register as a red flag. It registers as relief. It feels like the one relational configuration where he has never been punished. He wasn't blind to the pattern, either, and this detail matters more than almost anything else in his story. He built a 40-slide deck, complete with charts, analyzing his own dating history after the second marriage ended. 40 slides of rigorous, honest, intelligent analysis. He just built it after the second wedding, not before it. The analysis was flawless. The timing was the entire problem. The study, a widely cited body of relationship research, has found something genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. People consistently rate partners who resemble their early caregivers, specifically in conflict style and emotional responsiveness, not physical appearance, as more instantly attractive during first encounters, even when that exact resemblance is what predicts long-term dissatisfaction years later. Your gut is not lying to you when it says this person feels right. It's simply consulting an old map, drawn a very long time ago, by someone who had no idea it would still be in use decades later. The cost? It's worth pausing on what this pattern actually costs, in plain terms, before we move any further. Maren didn't just lose 2 marriages to it. She lost, for a period of nearly a year, the thing that had made her exceptional in the first place, her trust in her own read of a room. By the time her second marriage ended, she had started second-guessing decisions at work too, in the one domain where she had never once been wrong. The pattern doesn't stay contained to a love life. Left unnamed long enough, it starts leaking into the very competence that made someone brilliant to begin with. That's the real price of an unexamined pattern, not just a bad relationship, a slow erosion of self-trust everywhere else. Act 3, competence versus compatibility. Here is the actual failure at the center of this entire pattern, and it is far more precise than the phrase people usually reach for bad taste. Competence and compatibility are evaluated by 2 entirely different systems inside the brain. One is analytical, the same system Maren used to read a balance sheet, the same system David used to analyze particle data. It is explicit, conscious, and trainable. It gets sharper with education and experience. The other system is implicit, emotional, built almost entirely in early childhood, largely finished forming before a person could read. And it operates largely invisible to conscious reasoning. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't show its work. It simply produces a feeling and hands it to you as a conclusion. Smart people overtrust the first system for a completely understandable reason. It has never failed them anywhere else in life. It got them through school. It built their careers. It's managed their money. It has earned every ounce of their trust repeatedly for decades. But that system was never built to evaluate attachment, was never trained on that data, was never given that job. Asking it to assess whether a partner is safe is asking a brilliant calculator to judge a smell. It will produce an answer. It will produce it with total confidence. And it will very often be wrong, because it's answering a question it was never designed to answer in the first place. Story: the turn, Marin didn't fix this by getting smarter. That option was never available to her. She was already, by a significant margin, the smartest person in nearly every room she walked into. More intelligence was not the missing ingredient. She fixed it by adding a second checklist entirely. One, her analytical brain, for all its brilliance, had never been built to run on its own. Before her next relationship, she deliberately asked herself 3 questions that had nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with chemistry, and nothing to do with compatibility on paper. Framework: 3 questions. Question 1. Does this feel calm, or does this feel like a puzzle I need to solve? Calm is not boring, and this distinction matters enormously. Calm is what safety actually feels like, and a great many people have simply never felt it for long enough, consistently enough, to recognize it when it finally shows up. Question 2. Would I recommend this exact pattern to someone I love? Not this specific person, the pattern itself. If your sister, your best friend, your own daughter described this precise dynamic to you in detail, would you call it healthy? Or would you already be composing the intervention? Question 3. Am I attracted to who this person actually is, or am I attracted to the project of fixing who they currently are? This is the question that catches the most intelligent people, because fixing feels like using your best skill. But potential is not a personality. You cannot build an entire life with someone's potential. You can only ever build a life with who is actually sitting across the table. Marin didn't need a smarter brain. She needed to stop asking her smartest system to do a job it was never designed for, and hand that job to a slower, quieter set of questions instead. That's the pattern underneath this entire story. Not stupidity, not bad luck, misapplied intelligence, a brilliant tool pointed for years at the wrong task. Next, we go one level deeper, into why the people who forgive the fastest are often forgiving the same person again and again, without ever noticing that the name attached to the apology has quietly changed. That's next on Mental Index.